Okay, so this week, I wanted to change things up a little bit. I know in the past what we've been doing is kind of discussing concepts. We've been discussing like the purpose behind HTML, the purpose behind CSS, breaking those things down, and talking about how they work together to create like a web page. So this week, what I wanted to do is actually just go through the process and kind of like walk you through what it looks like to start from scratch. Kind of got some inspiring sort of sources for doing that, and I think it would be a good exercise for everyone to just kind of see me go through like, okay, this is from like A to B, like getting our code together and then getting it to show like as a web page. So I thought that would be maybe a nice exercise to go through. So if everyone's kind of like on board with that, I'm gonna walk us through that. Now, where we're going to start is not like this far back, but I want to take us down to this part here, because this part of this document I really like, and it kind of breaks down a couple of really important concepts that we'll need to kind of build just like first sort of first principles of like what is absolutely required for an HTML document that you just want to host a website on. So you might have seen me create like my sample page. And if I go over here, again, this is like where I host the code for my example page that I think everyone here is familiar with. So I don't have all of these elements. I have the head, the body. You know, I don't have, for instance, a title in this case, I don't think. Oh no, I do have a title. But I don't have, namely, doc type or the HTML wrapper. That's because the way that GitHub hosts things, this website, I don't need those things. But if you were to host your website out in the wild, you very well should include these things. So to get started, what we're going to do is actually just go ahead and we'll just copy this content here. And this is a good way to get started. A lot of like software, editor software, you can go ahead and kind of actually, you can have a template set up that'll basically like include this kind of content automatically. So then you don't have to worry about trying to remember what it is. But in our case, it's pretty simple. It's not as complicated as it looks. Can everyone now see the editor that I'm using here? It says Atom, and I just pasted this text. Just want to make sure you guys can see this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So I just pulled up this application. You might be wondering what this is. This is just a text editor. I talked a little bit about text editors last time and how there's a bunch of different options for them. You can use Notepad on your computer to do this, but I like this editor. It's called Atom. I actually have a link to it up here on this. Oops. If you go to the web page that I have going on, the resources, I've got a bunch of editors listed here. So you can click any of these links and like download the one that you like. This one's probably the most basic, very straightforward, easy to use. But I like this one too. It's not bad. So, you know, we got some tabs, we got some files here. So maybe one thing that would be good would be to kind of explain as well, like where I'm putting this file. But for now, I just copied the content and I'm going to save it like so into this file. So this includes this HTML element, which is going to wrap all of this inner content. And that's saying basically like this is an HTML document. Again, on my site, I didn't do this, but that's just because GitHub makes some assumptions about the content that you're posting. And in actuality, I don't even need any of this stuff either for GitHub, but we're talking about basically putting your web page out in the wild. And so if you want to do that at a minimum, you would want this. The next thing you're going to need is this head content here. And again, don't worry so much about where this is located yet. I'll explain that in a second. But I just want to make sure we have our kind of feet on the ground. Here, So this is the head element. This head element along with this body element, and we can actually add another element which isn't always present. You can see here that my editor actually recognized what I was doing when I typed in this footer here. So some of the editors will do that, but you can think of these elements as like kind of core components of a web page. So we have a footer, a body, and a head. So a head is basically saying like all of this content needs to be specified before the body of a page loads. So you're listing a bunch of things that are kind of like needed for this body content before this body content can like get going and doing its thing. And we can actually delete this image, but we can also use it doesn't really matter. We don't need an image in this case, but just to point out that this is our body, I can add some text here, like this is some sample text, okay? And we'll see what that's gonna mean in a second. But if I had something in my body here that was like using some styles that I wanted to like import externally, like I wanted to like load a resource and like have some styles separately, then I could load those here, which we'll do, I think, in this example. So that's kind of the gist there. The second part is this body. This is like, I think, kind of straightforward. It's the body of the document. So this is where you're going to put like all of what you would typically consider like your main HTML. And it's going to be where you do like most of your work. So you can see in this example here, I've got, oops. Yeah, I've got everything. Well, this is kind of not the best example because, again, GitHub lets me omit the body tag. So let me find maybe if there's a better example, but I think the best way to illustrate this is actually if we inspect. So this tool that we're now pretty familiar with, you'll see there's a body on basically any HTML page you're going to inspect. And you can see this is where all of the content for this page resides. So we have like, if we kind of go down through these elements, you see all of the individual stuff that comes up on our page get highlighted. And that's kind of letting us see kind of all of the different elements that we want to include as our content. So that's why I have this body here. And the footer is kind of the opposite of the header, which hopefully kind of makes some at least like logical sense. So the idea being that anything that I don't care to load immediately, like if it's a resource, typically it's going to be like a JavaScript resource. So if I wanted to put some JavaScript on my page, but it's not needed to load the page content, like for the user, I might put that in a footer. That's become less common over time. You'll see they don't even seem to have a footer, though they do have a head. That's because pages load very fast now. This was more of like a kind of an, not antiquated practice, but like it's pretty old. People don't really do this anymore, but it was like for really big JavaScript files. So like you'd have a script, this, so it, again, it auto-filled that for me, pretty nice. And except you wouldn't have a full script tag where you'd start writing JavaScript here. It would be like this, where you'd have a source like this. And then you'd say like, you know, in your directory on your server, wherever you're hosting this, you'd say like my script file.js, right? And if this file was really big, like it had a lot of line content, if you put this in your head instead, like this, close that out. Whoops. If you put that up here, oh, what did I do wrong? Seems to think I messed up some syntax, but oh, maybe just that. Not sure. in any event, it doesn't really like happen as much anymore. But if you loaded really big script files, sometimes your page would actually slow down, and then the user couldn't access the content that's in your body until the head finished loading. So it used to be like, yeah, you'd omit unnecessary elements and put them in the footer. We don't really do that much anymore because, again, pages load really fast, our internet's really fast, so you don't see it as much. So that's why they, I think, probably omitted this. Oops. That's why they omitted this in their example. So this is kind of like the bare essentials that we need to load a web page, but where do we like load this web page? Like, how can we start immediately just like working with this very basic page that we have together? Well, this is going to kind of take me to my kind of location, or where I am on my computer. That's where that's going to become kind of important. So I'm going to take us over to this part here, this directory tree, this file tree. So what's going on is essentially we got like our editor showing us where we are in our computer. I have a bunch of other like just example files. You don't need any of this, so really kind of not the most simplistic view. So let's actually make another folder. I can actually do this in my editor, but maybe for simplification purposes, we're going to do it so it's a little more clear. I'm currently in my documents folder. So to do this, you would just go to like my documents on your computer if you're on Windows. There should be a link in your file explorer. So it should hopefully look pretty similar to you. So I made this folder called dev because I'm developing stuff in here. And I made this other folder called home. You can see the other project that we have on my GitHub. This is the folder for that project, but we can actually make a new project here. And I'm just going to make a folder. Again, all I'm doing is just making folders. So I'm going to right click this and, oh, I think I have to do it here. Yeah, new folder. And I'm going to call it, oops. I'm going to call it like a sample project. But again, you can call it whatever you want. I'm actually going to put it back into dev. Oops. Okay, so that moved into dev. It's an empty folder. You can see if I drop it down, there's nothing in there. And then we have the file that we saved here, which I called new home. So I'm going to move it here. You shouldn't have to do any of this. You could just start with it in this folder. It doesn't matter. But if you started just opening your editor and you haven't even saved the file yet, this is a good place to start. You just pick where you want to save it, and maybe you could make this folder. I'm not sure if anyone's actually like, following along in their code, but just checking in to make sure, does this all kind of track with everyone? Like, we made an HTML file, we put it in a folder on our computer, and then we did all of this with our editor and we saved the content. Does that?
So will moving the file in the Finder change? Like, will the text editor automatically adjust to that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Good point, Moses. So no, yeah, that's my mistake. Hopefully, you didn't make the same mistake as me, and you haven't saved the file yet. Or you didn't like save it somewhere else. Yeah, let's, hold on. First of all, I'm gonna stop. How do I stop sharing this? Oh, maybe I can just move it. Yeah, wow. Life changing. Okay. So if I hover over this here, oh, it actually did work in my editor's case, but that's still really good to note because not every editor is gonna do that. So like what Moses is asking about is making sure like, hey, I opened this file, and we're gonna just remove project folder there, because it was just showing us the wrong directory in our case. But so what Moses was saying is like, what if I like edit the file in my editor and I save it, and then in my file explorer I move the file to a different location. In my case, my editor knew that I did that. So you can see it now has this folder, sample project, new home, and it knew that I moved it there, and it actually prompted me to save it again. But it is something to keep in mind. If you have the file open and you move the file and you click save, what it may do is actually just save it back to the place that you had it in originally. So keep that in mind. But in our case, it looks like, yeah, the file moved successfully. New home is no longer in this folder.
So that'll depend on what editor you use.
Yes, yeah, totally. Some editors are smart and they can kind of figure out what you're trying to do. But yeah, sometimes it's just a preference. You know, some people may not want it to figure that out.
All right,
so,
thank you.
Yeah, cool. So now we have this new file. We have an HTML file. So we also know where it is on our computer. It's saved in this folder. I saved it in this place called sample projects. So like, what do we do with this? Basically, how do we get from, you know, just writing some code on our computer, saving it as a file, and then opening it in a web browser so we can start messing around with it? Well, one really easy way to do this is to use, you know, to take advantage of your computer's graphical user interface. And you can actually basically, you know, your browser has good integration with your file explorer, or often with like your operating system. So what you can usually do is you can actually just drag a file and you can drop it into your web browser like that. And that's usually as easy as it gets, and it's hopefully what you're able to do on yours. You don't have to do that. In fact, what you see here is the full complete path to this file on your computer, and you can load it that way. So if you go to the URL, and what we would do is we'd type, and this is for Firefox. I think it works the same way on Chrome. Maybe someone using Chrome can confirm for me, but all I have to do is type file. Oh, were you able to do that, Mo?
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
It's just file. Okay, cool.
Just dragged it in there, and yeah, it worked.
Okay, awesome, cool. Yeah, so you can see we can actually use the browser to like walk around our computer and look at all our files. So I can actually look at files this way, right? And you'll see the same exact thing that I would see if I was in my users folder. Let's just go straight to documents because we don't need to see all of the other stuff. But yeah, so you see the same exact thing that I have here. So you can get to the file this way as well if you want to type in each item individually. And then at that point, it'll show you a nice tree. I think Chrome does this too. And you can just click into where it is, and you can click to your HTML. So let's inspect this and take a look at like how it decided to render it. So you can see all of our elements came in exactly as we'd expect. We have our head, which we specified. We've got our body, which is some sample text here. We've got the wrapping HTML, and we have the doc type. I don't think I really talked about this, but this is kind of an old standard of allowing the browser to identify the kind of document that it's trying to load. You would think that having these HTML wrapping tags would be enough, but I guess like it's just kind of an old standard, and they've kept it around. I also wanted to point out title. I don't think I mentioned that either. So title is actually what you're seeing at this tab. So it says my test page. So title lets you do like this kind of stuff here, like HTML basics. And I did a cool icon with this title, but it's simple to do. I just pasted in the icon that I wanted. But
should that always go in the head?
Yes, yeah, you'll always put title in the head.
Okay.
Yeah, good to clarify that. Okay, so hopefully everyone's following me so far. To kind of recurse, we created this file, we saved it to a directory to kind of see what that looked like. You know, we did this, you could do save as or whatever. I clicked where, this is, you know, one level up, another level up. So in my case, I went down to documents and I said dev, sample project, and this is where I want to save it. So I click save. In this case, it's replacing it, that's okay. We included all the kind of core stuff that we might want to use for our HTML page. We navigated to it in our browser and we load it, and it shows us our rendered HTML. So this is like the fastest A to B for you to start working with like a web page. So let's kind of go through, and maybe we can start adding some elements that we've like talked about in the past, but we haven't necessarily kind of done from scratch. So we've talked about different kinds of tags that are available to you, different kinds of like HTML elements. We talked about paragraphs before. We talked about like headers and things like that. There's definitely some on the sample page if you want to like look at them in more detail, but I'm going to try to run over them just sort of kind of quickly so you can see what that looks like. But all of the elements I'm going to address, they're all like in this sample page. So if you want to look at them like in detail, you can look there. So one thing I want to take a look at is kind of some core text elements, because a lot of times if you're building out an HTML page, it's useful to start with just text and organizing text as content. So the kind of core element to do that, or one of the most common ways to do that, is a it's a paragraph element. I think I've introduced before, but maybe seeing it in practice will hopefully kind of illustrate its use. So I'm going to move this text into this paragraph element. That's not going to do anything obvious right away. In fact, just to be clear, well, I'll show that in a second. But first, let's just move that into this P element. So we shouldn't see any change whatsoever really right away. I mean, you kind of space it down a little bit. You can see this is just because of the way that HTML likes to handle separating, like kind of introducing like real content in the body. Before we just have this like free form content, which it doesn't do anything special with at all. But now that we have a formal element, it applies some like default sort of spacing to that. And maybe we can see what it actually did here, but it looks like it added this margin, which I guess is just default for paragraphs, or just like an empty paragraph. So, maybe good to know if you like are starting your page and you really want to be exact, you could actually remove this margin if you wanted to, which we can get to maybe if we've got some time. But why would I do this? Why would I do this if, like, this, other than what I just showed you, that kind of weird spacing, which, is kind of negligible. Why would I do this if, like, this just basically, otherwise, I'll kind of undo here. I'm just undoing. If this looks fundamentally like, whoops. If this fundamentally like looks the same as this, like it's not doing anything effectively different, like why might I want to like use something like this this paragraph?
Oh, can I say this one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, so stop it. Stop. So yes, thank you. So when you place that content within those paragraph tags, you can now specify that content. That's one reason, but I had another one. So you can grab it if you need to grab it for editing within CSS. It just specifies it and allows you to categorize it, so to speak, within the page so that you can have like the most control over it.
That's like a really, really great way to put it. Yeah, like, I mean, that's pretty on the nose. The only reason we ever want to do this stuff is really for ourselves as developers. I mean, can you create a body with, none of these like kind of tags? Can you just kind of fumble your way around and maybe, add content like this, and then try to maybe add just certain elements around this kind of free-form content to, maybe get the spacing you want, or maybe even just do it in somehow in CSS where you just try to add spacing. Maybe you say every letter on a page gets this much padding and this much. I mean, you would be, overcomplicating things very quickly. So exactly as you just said, it's to like dedicate particular like sections of content so that we as developers can understand how our page is going to be organized and laid out. And you know, if you're like a writer or something, you're building like a blog, it helps you understand like how your thoughts are organized or how different parts of the page are laid out for you. So yeah, that's, I think, the best way to put it. It's really for us, like, to do this. I also wanted to point something out that I think sometimes isn't clear when you start out writing, like really getting into writing HTML, is this difference here. So, you know, we have this like this, we loaded it, we've already seen this. If I do this, can anyone like anticipate or jump in and say like what's gonna happen?
I'm gonna say nothing.
You would be correct. Nothing will happen at all. Yeah. And that's because white space is ignored. We call it white space. This blank, you know, space here, for example, this is all white space, what I have right here. So some languages, some coding technologies do need this white space. They need you to include white space actually for organizational purposes and also for you to separate content. But HTML doesn't care about white space at all. White space is purely for us as developers, as coders. So we don't need this here. I like to have it just because I like to separate the content from like the element. So I like to make it clear, like this is the content part of the element. And I like to do these indentations, but you don't have to do any of this if you want. And, you know, this is just kind of an exercise in just demonstrating what I'm talking about. But, you know, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but, you know, you can have something like this and it doesn't change at all how the page loads. In fact, you can see in the inspector, it kind of corrects you and just like fixes your terrible code. But
That would be what you would call clean code.
Yeah, certainly. I think the main thing we're trying to achieve here is readability for ourselves, helps us revisit our code and understand mentally like how everything's laid out. Some people, you know, like to do this. I don't see anything wrong with doing this, for example, like, you know, I think this looks fine too. So this part is like a personal preference, but yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, can other people read your code and understand what's going on? That's really important if you want to work in like an industry or professionally. And can you remember what your code is doing? This is also really important. So I'm gonna introduce, we do have 1 minute. Is everyone kind of okay to maybe go like a minute over or something? Or
That's fine with me.
Yeah, cool.
okay, cool. I'm just gonna go like 1 minute just to show this one last thing, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm gonna show you where these elements also come into play, because as opposed to just free form text, because a big difference here with this, like Idris said, is organizational principles, like knowing what's going to be a paragraph, what's maybe, you know, another element that we talked about before, which is a link. Not only does HTML recognize these special tags as an indicator that it needs to do something special with your content. So in this case, we have an anchor tag. This is going to be for a link. We have another kind of tag that we've seen before, an ordered list tag, or actually I think what we looked at before was an unordered list. So in fact, my editor is pretty cool. It shows me some quick descriptions of what I'm trying to do. But not only does HTML, like, or our browser, I should say, recognize like, oh, okay, I use this tag, so I want to represent content in a particular way so that it gives some new meaning. But it's also going to allow us to quickly, I guess, like, well, let me just show you the example I'm trying to think of in my head, and then maybe that will help me articulate what I'm trying to demonstrate for you. So, you know, we already know that white space is ignored. So in HTML, so this automatically, we can guess, is going to become something that you can, again, you can probably guess at. So if I save this and I load this page, it puts everything on the same line. That's because white space is ignored. So one way we could have already avoided this is to wrap everything here in a p tag. Here, we can say this, and again, I could leave this indentation like this. It doesn't really matter because of the white space, but okay. This, you might think will do something different. It's not really. It's still, this fake white space that we're showing here. It's not actually fundamentally doing anything. But where these tags start to come into play for laying out content, following on what Idris said, like trying to give us some ways to organize our page so that we can reference the organization later. What we can do is, when we see this as something like an elementary kind of basic unit of our page, like just one line of text, we say that is like a basic unit of the page. What we want to do is to start replicating this basic unit, and we want to start creating more sort of additional basic units to achieve what we want. And this is kind of a core principle of HTML that I know I've talked about a little bit, but seeing it and actually like working through it is the best way to believe it. So now you can see our page is kind of coming together, and we're using these organizational principles, which HTML is encouraging, using these tags to build elements and then giving those elements content. This is like where our page is going to start coming together. The P tag is special. It's a paragraph tag. HTML is going to treat it as what's called a block element. We can maybe cover that more deeply next time. We'll introduce some new block elements, but it just means that it's going to go beyond, like, it's going to go below the element before it. So it's going to be a new block, as opposed to a line level element, which I can introduce one really quick, but we don't have to get too deeply into. This is a line level element, span. It's just like used to wrap text. And I'll try to show an example later of like why we might want something like this. So I can put some text inside of this element. Additional text here, okay? And unlike the paragraph element, which will start on a new block, it's kind of like a new line. It's not always a new line, especially if you have text that spans multiple lines within a paragraph, but it's always going to be a new block. This span will not be. So when you load this here, you see that it just gets appended to this existing paragraph. So that's kind of the main difference between a paragraph element and like just content that's like in flow, basically, like this. And then content that's like inside of a block element here. So these things, again, like we've experimented with before, they're just going to end up next to each other. But they will be outside of the paragraphs because we've closed these tags. I know that was a lot of information, but hopefully seeing like the actual stuff happening maybe is kind of hopefully getting you thinking about it a little bit differently.
So you said the block level stuff always starts on a new line? Like if you put the next thing in a block level tag, it'll always start a new line?
Yeah, I think actually that's the best way to put it, is like it will always start a new line. I don't want to say it'll always be on a new line, because you can basically style block content to like not behave that way.
Okay.
So yeah, the line concept is a little bit difficult when working with HTML because that's the way it was designed. It was designed with lines in mind. So that's why a lot of sizing stuff is relative to like fonts. So like when you size elements, you're actually sizing relatively to like your font. That's because things are done on lines. So you can see here. Oops. Let's do it this way. Let me select this. It doesn't want to show me my nice blobs. I don't know why that is. Weird. Basically, this though is like on a line, maybe in layout. You can kind of see, yeah, it's changing some of, so like you can see this kind of, these specifiers here, oops, like a line height, stuff like that. These are kind of relics of like, basically when they made HTML, they expected everything to be text. Turns out people want to do way more than just like text with HTML. So that's where things kind of got complicated, but the line-based heritage kind of carries down. So, or I don't know why I didn't just do this. Yeah, we can just look at a different page, but you can see here a little bit better what it's, yeah, so see, this is like on a line. And so we've like changed the height of the line. This line height's like 51. It's here you can see the baseline height for this particular paragraph is like 15. So it's like by 15 there. It definitely gets a little bit complicated when you have a bunch of styles on a page interacting together. But yeah, I think the best way to think of it really is like block level elements are always going to try to, they're going to try to continue the page flow, start their own fresh content area. So like you can see here, this is actually a paragraph. So it's not going to continue on this existing like block level. It's going to go down to a new one. Whereas content, like span content, is going to just kind of continue. Like actually links are a really good example. So links are not block level. They're also line level. So it's just continuing off of this line. If it were block level, it would start a new block right here. Hopefully that's clear. I don't know if that's any clearer.
So if you wanted, because that link is an inline, if you wanted it on like on its own line, you would put it in another p tag.
You could put
like
it in another.
Like outside of the line.
Yeah, you could put it in another p tag. We can kind of do a quick example of that. So like I think we're mostly familiar with A tags at this point, hopefully, but just a reminder that an A is an anchor tag, so it's how we get links. You can see here, whoops, say A. Well, it doesn't want to recommend it to me anymore. Kind of wanted to see the, yeah, here we go. So it creates a hyperlink to web pages and stuff. It's how we hop around the web. So to get a link going, we need an href, which is basically like the link to the thing that we're trying to link to. So we can actually just link to this page, and we can do that on our computer. So I'm just going to store a link to this, and I'll put some text in here, like this is a link. So this is the content for our link. And again, I like to make content very clear. Now, to answer your specific question, like how would we block it out? So one way to do it would be to, put it outside of two block level elements. So that's one way to do it, because it's basically going to force it. I think actually, I don't think it'll put it after the paragraph, but I'll be interested to see. Not something I experiment with every day, so let's kind of find out what it does. Okay, yeah, so it puts it on its own block if you do that. So the paragraph gets its own block, and then, so you can do it that way, but I think, what you mentioned is kind of a really safe way to do it. And it's also clearer for the developer, I think, where you know exactly how it's going to behave. And you might say, well, I know exactly how it's going to behave in the way that you just demonstrated, right? Because like, you just showed it worked. But what if I like actually just got rid of the surrounding paragraph or something? Or what if I styled that paragraph such that it didn't behave the same way anymore? Now, other block level or like any kind of element is affecting like the way that surrounding elements behave. So it's a big reason why people use these block level elements, because you can isolate like this sort of layout behavior that they're going to give you. So, and this should give us basically the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and we can click it, and it works. Okay. I think we covered like hopefully what you would consider a lot. Hopefully maybe like you learned something that you didn't realize before when we were kind of talking about things at a more abstract pace. But next time, which I think since we got a little bit less time, we'll come in on Tuesday, next Tuesday. So what is next Tuesday? So that will be the 22nd. So we'll try to come on the 22nd and kind of pick up where we left off. But I think we actually covered a lot. So we'll be a little bit ahead probably. But yeah. Oh, hey. Hello, Austin.
Yeah, so sorry for the delay, everybody. Hopefully it wasn't too egregious. Thank you, Paige. Again, this has been really great. Sorry for the late start, everybody. And so, yeah, so we can do next week for anybody who wants to join. And then also there is Monday evenings from 6 to 8 with Paige as well.
What about the 29th? Are we changing the schedule or what?
I don't think we'll change the base. Yeah, we'll just basically pick up where we normally would. Yeah, I don't want to change like the calendar or anything. We'll just do an extra
great.
one.
2 weeks straight, great.
Cool.
So the next class is going to cover, like the one next week is going to be different material or the same material?
Oh, that's a good question. We'll see who joins. If people join, maybe that like were waiting and they were like, they didn't want to wait too much longer. I might try to like backtrack a little bit, since that'll be extra. But I think what I'll do is continue.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, yeah, it was good.
I was going to say we were talking about writing some code similar to what we were doing tonight, each of us in our own computers. So maybe we could do that next week.
Oh, like a follow along kind of thing?
I think so. I mean, just like basic HTML stuff,
Sure.
that nobody, I hope, would get too lost on. I mean, since it's like kind of a good consortium that we have working with, I think we could do it. But I mean, it's up to Paige, really.
We should do it, Paige. We should do it.
Yeah, I mean, does everyone here, since I have a good consensus, does everyone feel like they were able to like follow along I mean, it's totally okay if you weren't, and maybe we can do like an office hours session or something, and I can try to get people up to speed. But if we feel like, yeah, this is like a good way to do it, then yeah, maybe we can try to get to a point where we're all basically doing what I just did, and kind of all do it together and try to think about new complex elements that we might want to add to a page. I think that would be fun, yeah.
And then we would just need everybody to just be savvy with having a text editor, and then probably also a GitHub in order to, or I guess we can just drag the HTML document into our browser. So we don't even need. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I
think
guess
that
just
works.
like everybody should just find your text editor and be ready to rock.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, these links here, I made this page here. I listed some out. These are some kind of, I would say, progressively, maybe more like not intense, but like, you know, more useful tools. I would say this being like a simpler, like easy one. And then, you know, when you get up here, it's starting to get into more resources for like, if you wanted to write programs and stuff like that, you might use something like this to help you put your code together. But yeah, any of these really, like if you want to read about them or anything, any of these should work.
Can I suggest that we use the same editor, and Sublime is like, it's the one, man. It does it. It gets
do
it
I think
like
it's a
done.
great idea.
I like Sublime too. I'm down to trade out for Sublime. Nope. Yeah, that I'm definitely down to do. I think that is a good point. That'll probably help everyone follow along. So, yeah, Sublime is great. So yeah, that's a good suggestion. We'll do that.
Could you maybe make the test page you made today available on your site?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
the code somewhere?
Yeah, why don't I post it? I'll make a new directory in here. I'll just call it, I'll call it work in progress.
Examples?
Or something. Or yeah, example, that works too. I'll call it something that is useful. And then yeah, I'll make that available so everyone can kind of catch up to that point. And then we're all working off the same code. That's a good idea too.